Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I camp alone a lot. That's not me trying to sound tough. It's just cheaper, quieter, and honestly easier than dealing with people who panic at every snapped twig or distant howl. When you camp long enough, you learn the forest has its own language. You learn what belongs and what doesn't. This happened last fall in a state forest I'd been to twice before. Nothing wild enough to make the news. No legends, no warning signs, no stories taped to ranger stations. Just miles of trees and trails that feel friendly during the day and indifferent at night. The kind of place where help exists on paper, but once the sun goes down, it feels theoretical, like a concept rather than a reality. I made camp near a dry creek bed, just before dusk. Flat ground, soft dirt, easy setup. I remember thinking it felt right. That should have bothered me. The woods don't usually feel right. They feel neutral, or watching. By the time I zipped myself into the tent, the temperature had dropped enough to make my breath fog the air. I read for a while, then shut off my headlamp and let the dark settle in. Crickets, distant wind, a branch popping somewhere far off. Normal sounds, reassuring sounds. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but my phone later said 1:40 a.m. At first, I thought the sound was part of a dream. That half-awake place where your brain stitches nonsense together. But the longer I lay there, the clearer it became. Someone was counting. Not loud, not confident, more like whispering through clenched teeth. 3, 4, 5. I lay perfectly still, didn't even breathe. The voice wasn't inside my head. It was outside the tent, maybe 10 feet away. Close enough that I could tell it wasn't echoing. Close enough that it felt intentional. I told myself it had to be the wind slipping through branches. That's what people always say. But wind doesn't hesitate. Wind doesn't sound embarrassed. And wind doesn't stop and start again at 1. 1. The counting was wrong. The pacing was wrong. It wasn't steady, like someone keeping track. It felt confused, like whoever, or whatever, was doing it kept losing their place. Then the footsteps started. Slow, careful, pressing into dirt. They didn't crunch like boots. They didn't scuff like animals. They sounded deliberate, measured, like someone walking while trying not to be heard. The steps circled the tent. Every time the footsteps stopped, the counting began again. Always whispered, always starting at 1, always just outside my field of vision, even though I couldn't see anything at all. My heart was beating so hard I was sure I could hear it. I reached for my headlamp and snapped it on. The light washed over trees, brush, the pale curve of the dry creek bed. My own boot prints from earlier in the day were still there, sharp in the dirt. No person, no animal. The counting didn't stop. It didn't get louder or softer. It didn't react to the light at all. It just existed inside it, as if brightness meant nothing. 4, 5. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The numbers weren't English anymore. They still sounded like counting, but the words were sharper, older, like someone had heard counting once and was trying to recreate it from memory without understanding the rules. The sound scraped at my ears in a way that made my skin crawl. The footsteps resumed, slower now, closer. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just lay there, gripping the knife I kept in my bag, something I'd always thought of as a precaution, never a necessity. The counting continued for hours. Sometimes it circled. Sometimes it stopped right outside the tent wall. So close I thought I could feel breath through the fabric. But it never touched the tent, never scratched, never spoke anything but numbers. When the sky finally began to lighten, the counting stopped mid-whisper. Silence rushed in, thick and heavy. I didn't move until the sun was fully up. When I unzipped the tent and stepped outside, the air felt normal again. Cold, still, empty. I walked to the creek bed. There were footprints, bare feet, pressed deep into the dirt, like whatever made them was heavier than it should have been. The toes were long and uneven, too many of them, some overlapping. Some bent at angles feet aren't supposed to bend. They circled my tent again and again. Then they stopped, right where I'd been sleeping. I packed up in record time. I didn't finish my coffee. I didn't look back. I still camp alone sometimes, but I never camp near creek beds anymore. And when I wake up in the middle of the night, I count my breaths, slow and steady, because I'm terrified that if I don't, something else will start counting for me. Story 2. I've always believed fire has a memory. That's not something I used to say out loud, because it sounds like the kind of sentence that earns you concerned looks and polite nods. But after that night, near the old fire lookout tower, I stopped joking about it. Fire remembers. Fire listens. And sometimes it answers back. My cousin Mark and I were camping in late October, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones once the sun goes down. The lookout tower sat on a ridge above us. Rusted stairs, shattered windows, a place hikers took photos of and never stayed near after dark. We pitched our tent a little below it, in a clearing that looked safe enough. We built a fire before sunset, a good one. Thick logs, steady flame, the kind that makes you feel protected, like you've carved out a small island of warmth in a dark ocean of trees. Mark turned in around midnight. He was always like that, out cold the moment his head hit the sleeping bag. I stayed up, staring into the fire, poking at it with a stick, thinking about nothing and everything at the same time. That's when I noticed something was wrong. The fire wasn't changing. Usually, flames dance. They shrink, spit, settle. This one didn't. The logs didn't collapse inward. The flames didn't lower. They held their shape like they were frozen in time, burning with the same steady height, the same color. I checked my watch. 10 minutes passed. Then another. Still the same. I remember thinking, that's strange, in the calm, stupid way people think, right before fear grabs them by the throat. I stood up and scooped dirt with my boot, ready to smother part of it. As soon as I moved closer, the flames leaned toward me. Not like in a movie. No sudden flare. Just a subtle tilt. Like a person cocking their head to listen better. I stepped back. The fire straightened. My skin crawled. I laughed under my breath, forcing the sound out. Wind, I muttered. Just wind. But the night was dead still. Not a leaf moved. That's when I heard Mark's voice. Don't put it out. I turned so fast my neck popped. The tent was zipped shut. I could see his shape inside, curled on his side. He didn't move. Mark, I whispered. No response. The voice came again, closer this time, warm and familiar. Let it burn. It came from the fire. Same tone, same lazy drawl Mark had when he was half asleep. Even the small hitch in his voice he'd had since childhood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I backed away, Step by careful step, eyes locked on the flames. My heel caught a log, and I went down hard, the air knocked clean out of me. When I looked back up, gasping, the fire was normal, smaller, crackling, logs half burned, ash drifting upward like snow. I sat there shaking until the fire finally died on its own. I didn't sleep, not even for a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that voice, patient and calm, asking me to let it burn. Morning came gray and cold. Mark crawled out of the tent, stretching, completely fine. Too fine. "Why'd you rearrange the firewood?" he asked casually. "I didn't," I said. He pointed. Every piece of firewood we hadn't used was stacked neatly around the pit in a perfect circle. Each log was charred on one side, all of them blackened on the side facing the fire, as if they'd been turned inward, as if something had been feeding. We packed up without breakfast. Neither of us mentioned the tower watching us from above, or the way the fire pit still felt warm long after the ashes should have gone cold. I don't camp much anymore, and when I do, I'll let the fire die early. Some things don't like being left alone in the dark. Story 3. This one messed me up enough that I don't camp alone anymore. I used to think that was just something people said after a bad night in the woods, like a story you tell to make it sound deeper than it was. But this wasn't a bad night. This was something else, something that still doesn't sit right in my head. I hiked 6 miles into a backcountry area that required a permit. The kind of place where, statistically, you're not going to run into anyone by accident. Limited access, minimal foot traffic. If someone was out there, it was because they planned to be. I reached the clearing just before sunset. The light was low and orange, cutting through the trees like it always does in late fall. It was the kind of place campers dream about: flat ground and natural windbreak, and a stone fire ring already built. Lucky, I thought. That thought lasted maybe 10 seconds. As I walked closer, I noticed the dirt around the fire ring was disturbed. Not badly, just used. 10 impressions pressed into the soil. Rectangular, clean edges. They were mine. Same size as my tent. Same layout. Even the angle of the door matched the way I always set it, slightly off-center, so I could see the fire from inside. I crouched down and stared at the ground longer than I want to admit. I told myself tents are tents. Lots of people use the same gear, same habits. Then I saw the boot prints. My boots. The right heel had a worn curve from how I walk. The left sole had a small chip near the toe from a rock I stepped on years ago. I've checked that chip 100 times while sitting bored at campfires. I checked my GPS, same coordinates I'd saved months ago. Same elevation. Same waypoint name. I hadn't been here before. I knew that. I would have remembered this place. But the ground said otherwise. I stood there with my pack on, listening to the woods settle into evening. Birds quieted. Wind moved high in the trees. Everything normal. Too normal. I almost left. Almost. Instead, I told myself the obvious lie. That coincidence happens. That fear fills in gaps when you let it. I set up my tent inside the older impressions, matching them without trying. It slid into place like it belonged there. That should have been my sign. Night came fast, faster than it should have. The fire burned low, and the dark pressed in from the edges of the clearing. I ate without much appetite and crawled into my tent early, telling myself I was just tired from the hike. Sometime after midnight, I woke up, not suddenly, slowly, the way you do when something is wrong, but hasn't announced itself yet. I heard fabric rustling. Not close, not far. The soft scrape and pull of nylon being adjusted, like someone tightening a guy line or shifting inside a sleeping bag. But it wasn't my tent. I held my breath and listened. The sound came from across the clearing, from a spot where my campsite had been earlier. I unzipped my tent an inch at a time. The air was cold and smelled like damp leaves. Across the clearing was another tent. Same color, same brand, same size, set at the same angle. My heart started pounding, so hard I was sure it would give me away. The tent wasn't lit, but I could see its shape clearly in the moonlight. It looked occupied, slightly uneven, like someone was lying inside. Then I heard breathing. Slow, calm, familiar. I whispered, "Hello." The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. Thick, heavy, like the woods were listening. Then, from inside my own tent, behind me, I heard my voice. Not a whisper, not a shout, just normal. "Don't come out." Every hair on my body stood up. My mouth went dry. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the other tent. The breathing started again. I stayed like that until my legs cramped and my hands went numb. I don't know how long it lasted. Time felt bent, stretched thin. When the sky finally began to lighten, the breathing stopped for good. At sunrise, the other tent was gone. No fabric, no stakes, no gear. The footprints were gone too, except mine. A single set of boot prints led away from the clearing, heading north into thick trees. I followed them with my eyes until they disappeared. I packed up without eating. I didn't look back when I left. According to my GPS, I never walked in that direction. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up with dirt under my nails and the feeling that somewhere out there, a campsite is waiting for me, already set up,